South Africa will assume the chair of the BRICS for 2023. International Relations and Cooperation Minister Dr. Naledi Pandor says that South Africa's tenure will be marked by a sustained emphasis on concrete cooperation between BRICS nations that directly and indirectly benefits Africa and the world at large. Durko says that South Africa plans to strengthen economic, political, social and cultural cooperation amongst the BRICS nations. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says in the pursuit of a more inclusive, fair and stable world order, BRICS needs to play an important role in leading the process of creating new decision-making mechanisms within world bodies such as the United Nations. The expansion of BRICS will also be a point of discussion, with Algeria, Argentina and Iran having applied for membership, whilst Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Turkey have expressed interest in joining. Well, we're now joined by Thembisa Fakude, who's the Senior Research Fellow at the Africa-Asia Dialogues, to talk a little bit more about this. Thembisa, Happy New Year. I hope you had a safe transition.
It was good, thank you, and thanks for having me once again.
Wonderful. All right, so South Africa assumes the BRICS chairmanship. Let's talk about BRICS. It's been with us for some time now, and so we've got enough to reflect on in terms of whether it's been of value, whether it's fulfilled its potential when it was first formed.
Yeah, well, one wonders whether it has done that. South Africa is taking this chairpersonship for the second time. First time it was in 2018. There was that discussion about the BRICS Bank, which was supposed to help infrastructural development in the BRICS membership countries. We haven't seen much movement in that regard. So the best that we've seen so far is this annual meetings and rotation of chairpersonship of BRICS, but nothing really substantial has come out of it.
So, and the thing about BRICS is that you've got these two huge nations, China, Russia and India, I guess, in terms of population and a growing economy. South Africa, we always wondered how we fitted into this. Was it that we were the handle to the continent? What was it?
Well, we're nowhere close in terms of the economic size and geographical size and the demographics of the three countries I've just mentioned. We are a very small country. But at the time when this was planned, I remember Minister Mashabane, who was leading this, they wanted prestige. The association with BRICS brought some sort of prestige and nothing else, actually. And many people were criticizing this at the time, whether South Africa was biting more than it could chew, given that there was going to be some financial requirements, particularly when it came to the establishment of that bank. So it was mainly prestige and nothing else except that. It came with certain type of recognition by other African countries that South Africa was being accepted into these big clubs. But since then, we haven't seen anything really constructive coming out of it.
All right. So what can South Africa do as chair?
Well, it's going to be a busy year for President Cyril Ramaphosa. Not only is he going to be campaigning for 2024, which is going to start soon, he has to also deal with this one big project, which is the just energy transition that South Africa is committed to. South Africa continues to be part of G20 and is also committed to other bilaterals around the world. So it's going to be a very busy year for South Africa. But over and above that, you had a number of countries, as I said in your intro, that have indicated interest, countries such as Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, all of these countries want to come in, but most of them are coming in with their own baggage, political baggage, particularly countries such as Iran and Saudi Arabia. So it's going to be quite interesting that whilst President Cyril Ramaphosa wants to entrench himself within the G20 and the Western nations, at the same time his chairpersonship puts him in a situation where he has to rub shoulders and continue negotiating with countries such as Russia that has invaded Ukraine. So it's going to be a very interesting balancing act for President Cyril Ramaphosa henceforth.
You know, when Ukraine invaded Russia, there was a big debate at the United Nations. South Africa took a position initially and then quickly changed or clarified their position. I just wonder, when we look at international events, when they take place, by being in BRICS, are our hands tied in terms of being able to freely express ourselves when one of our member countries does something that perhaps isn't seen by the rest of the world as palatable?
Well, BRICS was meant to be an economic platform which was supposed to facilitate economic development in these countries. But it has graduated ever since into a political platform. And I think President Cyril Ramaphosa finds himself, or will find himself, in a much more difficult situation where he has to sit with Vladimir Putin, who continues to create and cause havoc in the Ukrainian infrastructure during this winter, causing lots of suffering in that country. And President Cyril Ramaphosa will find himself having to sit with this dictator. Luckily, we have Lula da Silva coming into the fray, and one hopes that he might be able to balance the act and perhaps convince Vladimir Putin to pull out of Ukraine. But as the chairperson of BRICS, President Cyril Ramaphosa will find himself in a much more difficult situation, since BRICS has graduated from its initial plan of being an economic platform into now an economic and social political platform.
All right, let's talk economics. I was looking at the trade balance between China and Russia and South Africa, and it seems it's more or less balanced. We're exporting minerals mostly, and we're importing electronics, etc. But there is always this issue on the continent about China landing goods that are so cheap that local products end up being priced out, particularly textiles. Is this something that they will address?
I think they might address that, but at the same time, you know, the South African government is caught between two very competitive markets. While the South African market, and I've been traveling since the beginning of December, you go to the rural parts of South Africa, children look really pretty and handsome because of Chinese products. So China has brought in these cheap goods, particularly the textile industry, but at the same time, our own industry has suffered. So you have the consumers who are saying they'll have to continue with Chinese products, but at the same time, the South African economy is suffering because our own economy cannot manufacture and continue to export. So again, President Cyril Ramaphosa will have to play a much more balancing act in terms of maintaining prices, because if you're going to be encouraging our own unsubsidized textile industry, it will certainly impact on cost. But currently what we have these cheap goods coming from China benefiting the wider market in South Africa. So you have to balance that act. And I think President Cyril Ramaphosa will have to try and do that. How he's going to do it, given that the unions have also been complaining in terms of shutting down of the textile industry, particularly in the Western Cape, is going to be a tough act to balance. But we'll have to wait and see. And I don't think there's any way that the South African government will prevent China from continuing to do what it's done in the past, that is, flooding our markets with cheap products.
Let's talk a little bit about this expansion that's being talked about and these countries that want to join. What's that going to do to this BRICS, and what do you see as the ultimate purpose? Is this another gathering of the clan against the Western powers?
Well, it looks like it. For me, the concern is the countries that are joining in. I mean, you have countries with really checkered human rights records, countries such as Iran that have indicated they want to join in. Currently, they are facing protests after the killing of Mahsa Amini, that young girl who was accused of not adorning a veil or scarf in an appropriate manner. We've got countries such as Saudi Arabia that's been accused of killing and chopping into pieces of Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey in 2018. So it's going to be quite an interesting one, because these countries that are coming in are not really countries that one want to associate with, but they want to come in. But at the same time, you've seen last week, G20 or the United States announced that it intends pushing for the inclusion of AU as a permanent member within the G20. So there's that expansionist program as well on the G20 side. So these are two competing powers. But whether BRICS will succeed in competing with an expanded G20, I don't think that will happen. So BRICS seeks to expand politically, and it seeks to expand its economic muscle. But what worries is that it also provides a lobbying platform for some really dodgy characters, including Vladimir Putin of Russia.
So will that put South Africa in a difficult position where ultimately at some point we might have to choose over an issue?
I think so. We saw in the past when Antony Blinken visited South Africa at the same time with Sergei Lavrov of Russia was visiting other countries in Africa, including Uganda. So South Africa has already chosen a side, and I think many countries know at least President Cyril Ramaphosa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa is placed. I'm not quite sure about DETCO, which has tended to sing from a different tune when it comes to foreign policy. But I think South Africa has already chosen side. President Cyril Ramaphosa is well liked and received by the Western countries, and I don't think he will jeopardize that relationship, that position that he has gained.
All right, Thembisa, we're going to leave it there for the time being. It'll be interesting to watch what does play out. It looks like 2023 is going to be a pretty interesting year. Thanks so much, and good talking to you again. All right, that's Thembisa Fakude, who's a Senior Research Fellow at the Africa-Asia Dialogue, speaking to us about South Africa, now taking the chairship of BRICS from China for the year ahead.